Hello, my name is Gary, and I am working with MediaTameen and Amin Al-Sheikh to present educational opportunities, classes to students. I've been teaching the English language now to those from other countries for the last 9.5 years. Before that time, I worked for many years in American business in the area of information technology. I was a computer programmer for many years as well as an analyst. So that is my background. I assume perhaps one of the reasons you're learning English is to come to the United States and attend school. So prior to that, there are a few hurdles that have to be overcome. You need to feel comfortable and confident enough with the language to undertake this mission, but also you need to pass either the TOEFL exam or the IELTS exam, which are exams that U.S. universities require in order to accept new students. I have helped students with these exams in addition to helping students with many areas related to these exams of the English language. One of these is pronunciation. And pronunciation can be a challenge in English, as it can be when one learns any other language. There are a few specific areas in English that make the acquisition of the language a little bit challenging. Apart from vocabulary, which is common with all languages, and pronunciation of words, there are also some difficulties that come from your own native language. Certain sounds that may be foreign, alien to your language that you would have to learn how to make to be understood by native speakers. And then, of course, in addition to the vocabulary, there are a lot of slang expressions that are very commonly used. And learning how to correctly pronounce these slang expressions is very important. Also, there's the whole aspect of the way Americans in particular speak. So if we take a sentence like, "My name is Gary and I am from the United States," typically, an American speaker will not speak that slowly and break each word down into an individual component. Typically, an American will say, "My name is Gary, and I'm from the United States." So we have certain words that they're called contractions, such as I am. We would say I'm, you are, you're. So that's another aspect of learning the English language, especially in the United States, where a lot of these words, these shortened forms of words, are used. Also, we tend to take a sentence and put together a number of different words. So if I were to ask you, "Have you seen this movie?" the way I would say it is, "Have you seen this movie?" So instead of saying "have you," we would say "have you." And this can take some getting used to. It can be rather difficult at first. I've had some people from other countries who spoke English well tell me that when they first arrived in the United States, it took them about a month before they really understood and were able to function. And that's because of things like that. Also, we have other abbreviations, such as I want to see this movie. We would usually say, I want to see this movie. So want to wanna. I could have done this if I had enough time. I could have done this if I had had enough time. Things like that are very common, and learning how to pronounce these expressions and how to use these expressions are very important to making your way in the United States, especially if you are to attend a school, because you will hear your teachers speak in this way. One thing that I've noticed about people from the Middle East is that their speaking abilities are typically quite good. However, the difficulties that they experience are usually in relation to writing. And I've helped many students learn how to effectively write, which of course you will need to do if you wish to do well on the IELTS test and the TOEFL test. The way I've done that is through giving assignments to my students, for example, to write an essay, which is basically a writing where there's a specific question that has to be answered. For example, if you had the opportunity to study in another country, where would you study and why? And then you have to write your answer to that using a specific format, which is called the essay, where you would have basically one thesis statement, as it's called, which is going to be uniting everything that you write. And everything that you write is going to be related to that. So, for example, your thesis statement might be, if I had the opportunity to study in another country, I would study in the United States because I am very interested in the US culture. So then you would write, after that, you would write 2 sections explaining perhaps one aspect of the United States culture in the first part that appeals to you. And then you would write another section where you would write about another aspect of the US culture that appeals to you. And then you would write a short conclusion. So after my students would do an exercise like this, they would submit it to me, they would give it to me, and we would then go over it together, and I would help them with some grammatical mistakes perhaps that they made. And then I would also help them with the format of the essay, how to connect their ideas, how to make the essay one unit instead of many disjointed units. So that's another thing that I've helped my students with. And part of what I do as well is I help students adapt to the United States. Sometimes students really don't have much of an idea of what they will encounter when they come to this country. And so we address that through different readings, through having conversations, explaining what it's like if you are indeed interested in coming to the United States, and what are some of the differences between the United States and your country. So the United States is basically a country that has been formed through the influence of people from many, many other countries. So it's unique in that way. If you were to go to Germany or to France, many of the people in those two countries would be either German or French. But in the United States, and to give you an example, people typically are from many different backgrounds. So on my father's side, my grandfather is German. My father's mother, my grandmother, is from a country that no longer exists in Europe called Bohemia, which is part of Poland now. And on my mother's side, all of my relatives are from Ireland, from the country of Ireland. So we use the word hodgepodge. A hodgepodge is a random collection of something. America, in a sense, is a hodgepodge. There are people living here and who have lived here for a long time from the Middle East, from Asia, from Europe. It's really very interesting, especially if you go to a city like the one I lived in for many years called Madison, and they have a really excellent university there that a lot of students are interested in attending. There are so many students from all over the world who are in Madison because of the educational opportunities. You might get to be friends with students from all over the world. But typically in the United States, there aren't that many people from other countries in some of the states. I think apart from, I'll say, Americans, I think the country, or I should say the countries that are most common to have people come to, and I'm talking about in recent times, are people from Spanish-speaking countries, such as Mexico, such as South America, Central America, Cuba. So there are quite a few people in the United States who speak Spanish as a first language. And I think a lot of people in the United States understand at least some Spanish as a second language. They teach Spanish in grade schools and high schools in the United States. So if you're from the Middle East, you might have fewer people who are familiar with Arabic. For English speakers, Arabic is a very challenging language, as are a few of the other primary languages in the world, Chinese and Russian. They are quite different from English. I think Spanish perhaps is one of the languages that is easiest for English speakers to learn. Another language in high schools that students learn is the French language, the German language. In recent times, however, the Japanese language has been introduced in schools. And little by little, the Chinese language is also appearing in some high schools as a class for high school students. So if you come to the United States, there will certainly be an adjustment time where you will need to find a place to live, find a store where you can buy food. You will, more than likely, if it's a larger city, you'll be able to find at least 1 or 2 restaurants that have food that they offer that's similar to the food of the Middle East. There's some really good Middle Eastern restaurants, for example, in the city of Madison in Wisconsin, and in many cities, actually. So the food will be a little bit different, especially typical American food. Americans, well, they tend to eat a lot of meat, and I mean, the typical American meal is to have a hamburger and French fries, the whole fast food concept. And because of that, there are quite a few Americans that are quite heavy. Maybe they watch a lot of TV and they eat a lot of food, especially unhealthy food. But over the years, as time has progressed, there are more and more Americans that are interested in eating a healthier number of foods. So they will be sure to try to have fruits and vegetables as part of their diet. Also, some Americans have become vegetarians, and I myself am a vegetarian, where I do not eat meat. I also do not eat fish. Some vegetarians, they're even more extreme than that. For example, they won't even drink milk or eat dairy products. So you might encounter some people who follow this regimen. I eat milk, or I drink milk and I eat ice cream. Ice cream is what I was thinking of because that's one of my favorite foods. Though I need to not eat as much as I would like of that kind of food, because it's very high in calories and one can put on weight. So the United States, as you probably have heard, there are 50 states. And so the East Coast, which is where New York City is, the West Coast, which is where Los Angeles and San Francisco are, and then more the Midwest. But then there's also the southern part of the United States. And in the South, they speak a little bit differently than we who live in the Midwest, the way we speak. Just for your information, the way I speak, the way people in the Midwestern part of the United States speak, this is the standard for the United States. But there are many people living in the South who speak a little bit differently. And I'll try to give you a little bit of an idea of what that sounds like, though I'm not a native of that area. So for example, if they wanted to say, I discovered a new movie that you should really see, they would say something like, I discovered a new movie that you really should see. I think you'd really like that movie. It's nothing like anything you've ever seen before. So my apology to any Spanish or to any people from the southern part of the United States in listening to that, because it's certainly not as accurate as they would be able to say it, because I'm not that familiar with the southern dialect. Though I did, when I was in the computer field, I did live in 2 southern states for a total of a little over a year, in the state of Kentucky and the state of Tennessee. So another thing you might find interesting about the United States is just the various climates the various things to see. A lot of my students, when they come to the United States, they really enjoy going to the western part where there are mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Grand Teton Mountains, and there are a lot of national, I guess you could call them monuments, such as Old Faithful, which is a geyser. It sprays water up every day at about the same time. There are national parks, such as Yellowstone National Park, which is very famous. Also out in the western part of the United States, there's a part of a mountain, it's called Mount Rushmore. And there are actually carved faces of some of the presidents of the United States. You might enjoy going out there and seeing that. So as in any new country that you go to, there's going to be things that you'll want to see. Online now, through YouTube, you can find videos of just about any location, any city that you are interested in visiting and what some of the highlights would be for your trip. I know that some of my Saudi students, specifically my Saudi students, though I've also had other students from the Middle East, they enjoy driving, and when they come here, they'll get a car that can go very, very fast. In fact, I had one student from Saudi Arabia who told me in answer to my question, what are you going to be doing this weekend? He said, I'm going to be visiting my uncle in New York City. And this was late afternoon on Friday. And it takes a long time to drive to New York City. But because he could drive very, very fast in his car, he was actually able to make it to go all the way to New York City, spend time with his uncle, and come all the way back to Madison by class time on Monday. So maybe it's something that you might want to be careful doing because, of course, the police are looking for people who are speeding. Speeding is a word that means going over a specific limit that's acceptable. But he fortunately made it back fine with no problems and no speeding tickets and got to spend time with his uncle. So I hope that you are able to join us in some of our English classes. One class, as I alluded to earlier, that I will be teaching is related to pronunciation and how to become familiar with how to form the words, how to use your mouth to say certain words, how to correctly pronounce vocabulary and slang, and how to learn some of the sounds that we have in English that may be very different from the sounds that you would use in the Arabic language. So thank you for joining me today. I hope a little bit of what I said gave you a better feeling for your adventure in an English-speaking country and very possibly in the United States, since you've listened to my video. So have a wonderful day, and I hope to have you someday as a student.